Hello and welcome to Autosport's look back at day one of testing ahead of the 2023 F1 season. I'm Martyn Lee and I'm joined today by Alex Kalinauckas, our Grand Prix editor at the Bahrain International Circuit. Before we go to Alex, let's have a look at how day one finished. It was Verstappen that topped the timesheets. Not that they mean too much on testing, but remember, only 3 days, so the teams aren't hanging around before the first race of the season. 157 laps put in for Verstappen with a 132.837. While we're talking about doing lots of laps, an honourable mention for Williams and lots of flow viz today, but about the same laps between their two drivers. Verstappen in the car all day today. He was followed home by Alonso in his new Aston Martin colours. And then the two Ferraris of Sainz and Leclerc, followed back by Norris in his McLaren, and then the first of the Mercedes with Hamilton in 6th. Like I mentioned, the Williams of Albon in the top 10 on the times. It is just testing, but with only 3 days, the teams are not hanging around. The Alfa Romeo of Zhou in 8th, and then the second Mercedes with Russell in 9th, and rounding out the top 10, good to see Logan Sargent in the Williams as well. Well, while most teams opted to run both drivers on day one, splitting the duties in the morning and afternoon sessions, Red Bull chose to have Max Verstappen in the car all day. Well, let's bring in Alex right now, part of our team covering testing this week. So, first of all, it's great to have the cars back on track. I thought they looked fantastic at night as well when the lights came on. What a fascinating day it's been. A familiar name at the top of the timings there with Max Verstappen leading the way. I know times don't matter in testing, Alex, but they did more laps this morning on the first morning than they did the same morning last year, and they'd had 3 days in Barcelona last year. So we got to see some pretty decent running and the actual RB19 up close. What do you think about Red Bull's day at work today?
Well, I think you definitely prefer to finish at the top of the times than basically anywhere else. But no, you're right, Martin. That summary there is pretty good. They can have, frankly, no real complaints. I mean, I'm sure there are all the usual niggles going on in testing, and everything will come out soon enough, or well, depending on how tightly controlled Red Bull's media machine is. But yeah, great start. As you say, we saw the RB19 for the first time. Very, very similar to the RB18. I don't know, I guess it's because Red Bull have a reputation of being, incredibly developing very well and introducing new ideas for their aero parts. You're a bit disappointed when it's not suddenly doesn't look like a totally different car. But it dominated the championship last year, so no real reason to change, of course, to Red Bull. And as we know now, it was how well the car was riding compared to its rivals that really made the difference. So yeah, nearly 160 laps for Red Bull, sort of low fanfare, as I said. But you mentioned, Martin, it's great to see the cars back on track again, how good they look on TV. I was really, really lucky to go out and spend actually a couple of hours trackside today, and I must say, of the Red Bull in particular, it looks pretty much as it did last year, running very, very stiff, but not wildly bouncing, not looking out of control or anything. It's planted and poised throughout all the corners. So yeah, really strong start for Red Bull.
Ferrari making a change at the beginning of the day, not with their car, but with their strategy team, moving their head of strategy into a factory role. But let's talk a little bit about the changes that we saw on track rather than the people moves that Frederic Vasseur, as the new boss there, is putting into place. Ferrari weren't far behind Red Bull on the timesheets. Not that the times matter, it's just testing, before everyone in the comments just crucifies me. But obviously they're doing setup work. It can be a huge difference in terms of fuel load and seconds a lap. So it's really hard to read into. But you were trackside, you saw the Ferraris on track. What did you think of them?
Oh, so I think certainly a much more interesting day, let's put it that way, for Ferrari. As you said, Martin, still close in terms of the times, but also to make a point for when those crucifying comments come in, I think at this particular time there's been absolutely no performance running. It's all about doing exactly what the teams wanted to do today, which is rack up the miles, get that reliability built in, and obviously that's a big focus for Ferrari, looking at how 2022 ended up. But also, yeah, you mentioned the sort of news stories coming out around the strategy team that will have raised interest in the team, but I don't know if it was picked up certainly in the morning running. The nose panel at the front of the Ferrari was sort of flexing really oddly, and you really don't want to be doing that sort of aero surface. That was absolutely not for performance reasons, before anybody gets carried away thinking about flexy noses or whatever. It's understood there was just a little bit of support structure that sits behind that part of the nose actually missing, and they very quickly fixed that. So yeah, not a big drama there at Ferrari, despite the fact it looked rather amusing. Sort of in the afternoon, when Charles Leclerc took over from Carlos Sainz, things were a little bit more stop-start in terms of the run plan, but I'd say that's nothing to be concerned about on the surface. What was interesting, and this is also picked up by the TV cameras, was that the car does appear to be bouncing quite a lot more than certainly a lot of the other cars, particularly the Red Bull. Now, obviously, that's really in the news because of the fact that the floors were raised to be higher, the rules were changed to eliminate porpoising. So I asked Frederic Vasseur about that in the press conference, asked Toto Wolff about that as well, because Mercedes, of course, last year, very closely linked with porpoising, and both of them said it's not doing that. It's hitting a bump. There's a big bump on the entry into turn 12. I went out and watched that as the sun came down, the evening rolled in. All the cars are hitting it, but the Ferrari is quite dramatic, actually. And there's another big bump just opposite the pit exit on the run down to turn 1 that is triggering what does look like porpoising. But the team is absolutely clear. Vasseur said it's not as it was 1 year ago where the car was bouncing like a kangaroo. So that's a positive thing for Ferrari. But it definitely seems to be more on the edge. And porpoising, despite the fact that it's then going to be less than an issue, it hasn't gone away. If you alter the setup or the ride too much, you're still going to get it. So the teams are always going to be concerned about that. But yeah, like I said, a more interesting day for Ferrari. Certainly not a disaster. Certainly not sort of shining, solid. All good so far.
Well, you've mentioned bouncing, porpoising, two different things, according to Mercedes at least. They've got to be relieved, given that didn't seem to be an issue today. In fact, Toto Wolff said to us that it wasn't performance limiting. That's the phrase he used. But as you've said, they're not going for performance runs today. But Mercedes have got to be so relieved that they can start to run that car and start to understand it and not be all of a sudden surprised by this phenomenon which they weren't expecting on their car. How did they look today?
Well, very solid, actually. As you said, Martin, you allude to the porpoising and bouncing things being different rather unhelpfully. When I said to Toto Wolff, have you seen any porpoising today? He said no bouncing. Now we know that's a different thing when it comes to the suspension. Obviously, on the W14, both axles, the suspension has been really heavily reworked. So the fact that it should give a little more play, a little more travel, not be as near rock solid as it was last year, made things really, really tricky for the drivers in terms of ride stability. Basically, looking trackside, it looks a lot more planted. Like, we went out to turn 12 mainly to look at what the Ferrari was doing there, but the Mercedes didn't look too dramatic at all, because Toto did say that was the only time they were really seeing what could be interpreted as sort of like a bouncing or a porpoising or something, but again, it's hitting that bump going through turn 12. But yeah, what the other thing with the new Mercedes is that both drivers are quite adamant. They're like, the last car might have been really quite terrible, but it was very, very reliable. Again, they've done 150 odd laps today, so that's a very strong start on the reliability front for the Mercedes too.
Obviously, this is just day one, but it's only day one of 3. And so it's just testing. I keep saying it, but we do start to have a look at how the teams are shaping up. In fact, Adrian Newey was asked today who the competition are going to be. And he said, of course, Ferrari, Mercedes, and perhaps Aston Martin. So ouch, McLaren, ouch, Alpine, who've definitely got big ambitions to rise above the midfield, but he didn't seem to be too concerned about what they're doing. We saw McLaren doing some running repairs once again to the front end of their cars. It wasn't anything like the braking issues of last year, though. But how do you see the midfield teams after the first day of running?
Yeah, certainly very positive day for Aston Martin in one sense, in that the car looks very fast. Fernando Alonso jumping up the times late on, but also I think just the sense coming out of the team from just in terms of relating to the car, they're actually quite bullish. I think that sort of the sense is all they are confident of making a step, and they were very good in 2022, and certainly going from being badly off the pace at the start of the season to be making a lot of progress heading towards the end. So the suggestion is that it's kicked on further, that the design around the aero surfaces is really getting a lot more sophisticated and things like that. So yeah, really do want to keep an eye on Aston Martin. I know we're going to come on potentially to talk about what's going on with Lance Stroll and Felipe Drugovich later on, but just in terms of the car for the Aston, I think that's something to really, really keep an eye on. Alpine and McLaren, it's similar to what they were saying at their launch events. Alpine is confident it can kick on. McLaren a bit more pessimistic, and nothing I've seen today, really disputes that. But as I said, because there's been no performance running, it's really hard to say that at the same time. What I would say is will we perhaps see the midfield teams switching to something more akin to sort of a glory run? They don't really do the that sort of thing, send it out on fumes and do a completely fast lap anymore in the modern era. But if you're looking for a happy story, maybe one of the teams would be keen to put on some softer tyres or something like that and get some positive coverage that way. But yeah, like I said, I think Aston looking like the bigger mover, or at least confident of being that. Whether it turns out to be true, not sure yet.
Lots of laps on the board today. I gave an honourable mention to Williams at the beginning. But should we expect issues over the rest of the test? It's only 2 more days before we go into FP1. But when do you think teams are going to start to take out some fuel, put those performance bits on the cars? And even though we saw the drivers today pushing hard in places when, and obviously exceeding track limits, not that's a thing in testing, but when do you think we'll really see the drivers with the tools to push on?
It's definitely not a thing in testing. I don't think the FIA have even got people in race control monitoring that, because why would you need to in testing? You can do exactly what you like. The theme of the day really has been reliability. We've talked about it loads on this video already. I would expect things going forward to maybe look a little bit more questionable on the reliability front. When you have 1 red flag today, probably going to be more going through the test. But I think the key time to be aware of when teams will be doing performance runs, when they will be looking at really trying to understand how their cars work best in optimum conditions, is after the sun has gone down, when it's dark, the temperature has dropped in the evening sessions essentially. So it's really it's significant that Max Verstappen is going to be back in the car tomorrow afternoon, evenings. That's when he'll be doing his last bit of testing, and he'll be getting his eye in terms of the Red Bull at its absolute optimum. And then Sergio Perez will take over, do that on the final day, and he'll be all day in the car like Max was today. But in terms of will the reliability stick around? Well, the parts are going to be aging. They're going to be stressed that little bit more. They're going to be getting towards the end of their lives by the factor of the fact that they've just been running a little bit more. Not that they should be in any danger of failing because of how young they are, but this is testing. That's when it's designed, or for a team, ideally, if you want to have a failure, is when it's going to be now. There'll also be the sort of dry run in terms of the fuel systems, deliberately running the cars dry, or at least very, very close to that, to see how the fuel systems are working when they're absolutely on fumes. Teams have been caught out not doing that successfully in testing when it comes to racing, even here recently. So yeah, I'd expect at least a couple more red flags to come. I mean, we're not hopeful of it, but it's definitely more likely in the coming days.
Final word on Felipe Drugovich standing in for Lance Stroll at Aston Martin. How do you think he did? And is there any official word on Stroll's injuries? I have seen one F1 journalist who's very well respected and been in the paddock for a long time saying today that they think that Stroll's injuries are a little bit worse than the team are saying. But we'll go with the official line from the team, though. Have they told us anything? And will we see Stroll in the car either for testing or for the first race next week?
So let's start with Stroll first. The official line coming out of the team is that they won't even talk about it to discuss his injuries. Although Mike Crack, the team principal, did reveal that it's related to the injuries is related to his wrist. That's what he's damaged in that mountain biking accident. So. That's obviously very concerning. In these sort of things, you do want to respect someone's privacy, but obviously it's a key thing for the team at this time of year. I think the suggestion that the paddock whispers, the paddock rumours are, it is quite severe, and it would be unlikely to see Stroll definitely in testing, and maybe even for the race too. Now that may not come to pass, but the suggestion from talking to other teams is, it's looking not good for seeing Lance Stroll making his 2023 debut on time as planned. The team is supposed to be understood to be releasing some news tonight about Felipe Drugovich carrying on, if he is going to be carrying on for the rest of the test, or at least taking any more part in the test. They said that they were taking it almost hour by hour. They would make the decision during the afternoon running. In terms of Felipe Drugovich, I thought he acquitted himself very well, despite the fact not his fault, got off to a very unfortunate start. There was an electrical gremlin on the Aston, triggered a sensor problem and basically shut down the car, caused that one red flag of the day. So it's interesting, without that, we could have got through the whole day without a single red flag. He seems confident, very relaxed. He's always, I've interviewed him once for GP Racing magazine, Autosport's sister title, at Austin last year after he won the F2 title. He's a very relaxed, confident guy, and he seemed happy enough after he got out of the car. He was the only driver in the press conference that actually driven the car, so he was able to give a nice bit of insight on that.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. Thank you for watching as well. If you want to follow our videos through Bahrain testing all the way into the new season, you can subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And if you like this video, make sure you click the thumbs up so we know you liked it. Who do you think did well today? Do you want to crucify me for reading out the times at the beginning of the video? Because it's just testing. I mean, I don't mind if you want to. That's fine. Let us know in the comments below what you thought. We'll be back in less than 24 hours to cast an eye over day 2 in Bahrain as the teams and drivers begin to dial in those performance runs. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.